Welcome to Northwest Arkansas Investing Podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing in Northwest Arkansas.
Whether you're a seasoned investor just starting out, we bring you expert insights, market trends, and practical strategies to help you build wealth through real estate.
From buying and selling to property management and long-term investment planning, we cover it all so you can make smart, informed decisions in this fast-growing market. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Northwest Arkansas Investing Podcast. I'm here with Brian Wagers, myself, Brandon Still, and Kathleen Caldarera with Ghan Cooper. Good to have you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on. She brings a wealth of knowledge kind of around asset management, a lot of multifamily, obviously, which is a lot of what our listeners love to hear. And so she's out of the Fort Smith area. And so Kathleen, give us a little bit of an idea, kind of, we'd love to get just a 30,000 foot view of your background, kind of where you started. You mentioned we were just kind of chatting before this, but kind of from New York area, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of, we'd love to hear kind of how you made it down here and then what that journey's kind of looked like.
Awesome. Yeah, so I actually started in real estate in New York. I was a realtor when I first got out of college. I just had a baby. I just got married, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do real estate. And that was a huge unsuccessful go at it. I was young, I was uneducated, and extremely inexperienced. I'd never even bought a home, so I had no idea what I was doing. I think I sold maybe 2 houses in the year I was there, and then all of a sudden we had to move to Fort Smith, Arkansas from New York. So I cried for about 6 months and then hopped in a car, drove halfway across this country with my 1-year-old. She had just turned 1, and my sister, and we hit Memphis, so Arkansas, and it was just flat. I'm like, oh my God, where did they take me? So we ended up here in Fort Smith in 2006, and I had really no job at the time. I was still kind of bartending in the restaurant industry. I'd been in that throughout college and after college, and my husband at the time was gone all the time. And so I was back in New York, and I finally decided, all right, Kathleen, you've got to settle down. You've got to make some friends. You got to get a job. You got to do something. And so I replied to a blind ad for an assistant manager that was paying $8.50 an hour. And I replied to it, and it was for this property management position, which I had never heard of. What did that mean? And I'm like, okay, let me apply for this. And they gave me the address. And I didn't know Fort Smith very well at the time, sort of. Mm-hmm. And I knew right around this area there was 2 complexes, one huge one and one kind of smaller, less intimidating. And I remember the whole drive there, I'm thinking, please don't be the big one. Please don't be the big one. And of course I pull in and it's the huge one. And P.S., I still manage that property to this day. So that awesome. Was in 2009 until now. And I pulled in, interviewed, and they were like, yeah, you can take the job today. And I'm like, okay, how do we get this started? And through this time, I had been divorced, so they told me you have to live on site. And I thought, oh my God, I have to live on site with my 3-year-old at this huge property I don't know. And it ended up being, one of the best things that I ever did. I took that job, went on site, lived there. I stayed there for maybe, I would say it was about maybe a year, okay? And at the time, my ex-husband was moving to Texas, and he was like, hey, Kathleen, why don't you come down here for a little bit too, instead of going home, and then after that, you can move back to New York, which was my goal at the time. I just had to get back home. Mm. So I moved down to Texas for a little bit to live around him so that he could be close to our daughter, and I got a call from Cliff Cabanis one day randomly in Texas, and he says he owned Trinity Multifamily at the time with John Baxter, and he said, hey, you used to manage Timberline for us. I want you to come back to Fort Smith and manage this property again. I'm like, who's going to be the manager? And he's like, I'm not telling you. And I'm like, well, I'm not coming then. So he says a name. He says Zach Smithson is going to manage it. I don't know if you know who Zach Smithson is. Mm-hmm. Partners with Dave Pinson. And, Dave Pinson's going to be a part of this. And, we want you to come back and do it. So I said, okay. I had no idea what I was doing with my life still. So we come back to Fort Smith, and that's kind of where my real started. And I was back in 2010 again. And that's when we started at Timberline for real and for, real leadership and guidance. I still say to this day that I trained Zach and Dave how to do their job. They can kind of thank me later for that.
That makes sense, especially after having Dave last week, right?
Yeah.
So, just thinking about around that time, 2005 to 2010, kind of what Northwest Arkansas was at the time.
Yeah.
like trying to imagine how even Fort Smith was going from New York. Probably not much at all, right? I mean,
no.
yeah. Even I guess even looking at your job too, was there a lot of multifamily at the time that was built up? You know, that was out there. Like, was there a lot of business available out there? Yeah.
No, I mean, Fort Smith was what it was. You know, it was all local owners. Nothing ever traded. Not that really hit the market. You know, it was all small little local owners, and they each owned and operated their own apartment complex, and that was what they did. You know, even when I first joined with Trinity, I mean, we were not really a third-party property management company, not truly. I mean, Cliff and John really were partners. They had partners, and this is, I wouldn't even call it syndicated back then. You know, you just found a bunch of people that had money in town, and one person ran operations, one person brought the bulk amount of money, and someone brought the knowledge, and, you know, they bought these apartment complexes, and then we just managed them. And I remember it was probably a year after I was there, so maybe around 11, sometimes 2011, they really started to branch out to third party and start to say, okay, fine, he's my friend, and we're going to take this property for him and try and help him out. And we were pretty successful with that in Fort Smith. And Dave kind of took over. He, at the time, was the regional director for like the Oklahoma City area, Northwest Arkansas area, and he still even managed some properties that they had, I don't know why, but in Fort Smith. So that was kind of his role, and, you know, that's when we really started to branch out into the third party realm a little bit. And that was back before, you know, repositions meant anything. You know, we were still, you know, cutting the wires to your AC if you didn't pay rent back then. You know? Banging down the doors or just leaving it open if you didn't pay rent. You know, it was the wild west still of property management is how I like to call it. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, times are a bunch different now.
Yeah, seriously. Even I would imagine even collecting, it looks a lot different now than it did back then.
Yeah.
I know my dad even, I mean, he was a small multifamily guy, but he's going to knock on the doors to get his rent every month. What did that even look like back kind of when you were getting started?
I'll never forget this. I'd been promoted to manager, and I had an assistant who worked out of my office, and all of my assistants, since I had the only office that was it had two people in it, everyone else had one person office. So if someone, you know, got a promotion, moved on, my assistant would usually take their position. So I had an influx of assistants that were in my office, which was fine. By that time, I could manage to run. I was about 307 doors with my eyes closed. I'd been there for so long, and she was every bit of 7 foot tall. I mean, every bit of it. And she would go out there and she would be banging on people's doors, and she'd come back, Kathleen, I got $5 cash, you know, in her hands. I'm like, oh my God, you know, what is happening right now? And unfortunately, with that kind of collections and cash and people coming in, we started to see like, okay, application fees are going missing. Like, what's happening to the application fees? You know, little things in the office were going missing. And I'm, trying to talk to her like, hey, what's happening is application fees. She'll be telling me these crazy stories about, that must have, someone came into the office and they must have taken that, and I don't remember because I think I also got bit by a brown recluse and it was in my artery and I have cancer. And it's like, oh my God, I used to think people told the truth. I swear to God, before I got into this industry, I swear I thought people told the truth, and I thought people paid the rent. I had no idea that people didn't pay rent, and I had no idea how much people exaggerate the truth. So it turns out she was definitely taking the application fees and a lot more than that. So I think after so many times of learning that, we all realized, okay, we've got to streamline these processes. We've got to get better software, make people pay on rent online so that you can just alleviate some of these things that are just unfortunately a cost of doing business and are gonna unfortunately happen to you at some point. But
that's awesome. Yeah, the things you learn. I'd love to piggyback off of that though, and get a little bit more background on Ghan Cooper and the company you're with. Same company, I guess, the whole time, correct? Or it's kind of evolved, I guess. Same people.
People. Yep. In 2019, I had a client, and he was also a banker in Fort Smith, pretty big investor in our area at the time. And he said, hey, I've got these two friends, Bob Cooper and Stuart Ghan, and They own Ghan Cooper, which was more of a commercial brokerage and management company. And they did mostly their own stuff too. A little bit of third party, but they're very, centrally located to Fort Smith and pretty big in that market itself. And, they want to dive into multifamily. And I told them, I've got to talk to you. So I set up a meeting between us. I sat down with them and we decided, okay, we're going to start this property management company. And, we're going to buy the property, Kathleen, then you're going to manage it and you can invest in with us too. So in my mind, and my naive mind at the time too, and they'll say this too, I thought they were going to buy the property and we were going to manage it, not really a lot of third party. And I put in my notice, I gave Trinity about like an 8 or 9 month notice, which you have to do when you're at that kind of level. And
what was your title before you
so
left?
I was, and the first woman of that too, the vice president of property management on the eastern side of the company.
Okay.
So I had about 11 states and
11 states. How many units were you guys up to at that time?
Trinity itself was probably 20 to 22, give or take, taking some on, taking some off. 20 to 22,000. I probably had almost 12,000 of that. There was 3 VPs at the time I was leaving, and my portfolio was pretty big. But again, I had Fort Smith and Little Rock, Central Arkansas, and those were huge areas for us. So that's why my portfolio was bigger than, some of the other VPs. They were, in newer markets for us. But I went everywhere from Michigan, Indiana, Georgia, and kind of straight down the east line of our company, and I use Fort Smith as the east and west point if I can. I had about maybe 8 or 9 regionals underneath me at any given time. And at that level you're only hearing the fires, someone's mad or someone's done this or someone's done that, and after that long of doing that you're ready for a little bit of a change.
I don't blame you. It's property management. I think when I just look at local companies that I'm typically working around here, just when you start to get in the weeds, understanding kind of what goes into the whole operation is crazy. I used to think when I was in college, my dad had a client that wanted us to manage 20 units or so for him. I was like, Dad, we should jump on this. Just only seeing like the dollar value that we can potentially make, not knowing anything else. But kind of looking back now, it's crazy kind of what all can go into the operations of that. And especially when you're doing it across, you said 11 states. So tell me a little bit, I'd love to hear a little bit more on kind of like the early influences of you getting into this gig. You mentioned that it was kind of just a job posting, but I'd love to know, was there ever a real estate background in your family or a real estate background before, or was it truly kind of by chance?
Truly nothing. It was truly by chance. I come from a family of really teachers, attorneys, but a lot of teachers, just very standard middle class family from Fort Smith. I don't think that I even knew anyone that rented an apartment,
Really?
And not where I'm from in New York, it wasn't really like that. Now that looking back, I know that some of them rented the houses that they lived in and stuff, but it just wasn't a part of my culture growing up whatsoever. I had no idea even the baseline of what to do when you came into it. And so, but I think what that also made me successful too, because I was able to really train people from the ground up, because that's how I had to learn it. I had
trial by fire.
Yes. But it's, I always say this, I hire back in the day. Now it's a little different. Back in those days, if you were a good waitress or bartender that I had, I would always talk to you like, hey, come work for me, because come work with me. At the time, you could deal with people, which is huge in this industry. You have to be able to deal with people and listen to their stories, because as a property manager at that level, you're, their therapist, their banker, you give advice, and you just have to listen, and you could handle money. It's a cash industry too, restaurants, so it's, hopefully you're a little bit more trustworthy. So that was kind of my thought process. And I was pretty successful in, Fort Smith when I first became regional, and hiring people like that and really teaching from the ground up. Now, I don't advise as much. And I tell all of my clients this up front, like, you truly do get what you pay for. And I've watched time after time, if you really put the money into your staff, you get it back in your returns. And there's just no no doubts about that. You
Yeah.
know? And I tell everyone, don't be cheap. You have $1 million, to $30 million asset, and you definitely don't want someone making $15 to $18 an hour running that for you. Do you
Right.
know? Because they're the ones there every day. I'm not there every day. They're there every day. They're talking to people, and you really have to have trust in that person, and you don't want them to job hop. And it's so easy to do that if you're not happy where you are and you're not making a living that's going to be sustainable for yourself or your family. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's easy to, when you're looking at it from a numbers perspective, just, you know, there's places where you feel like you can go cheaper.
Yep.
Sounds like property management is never one of those places where you want to, I mean, if you really want to maximize your dollar, having the right property management is huge.
Yeah.
What are some of those, I guess, big, I mean, this is super broad, but what are some of those big lessons that you feel like you learned early in your career with Ghan Cooper, on the real estate side or on kind of the hiring side?
Okay. In real estate in general, when I first started this and worked with Trinity, I think I learned my biggest lesson was that bigger is not always better. It takes a lot of middle level management greatness to make a property management company run, and if you don't have that across the board, it really is hard. With Ghan Cooper, I think that I have learned reporting is so important. Teaching and communication. I mean, I think it's so hard when someone like Brian or yourself would come to me and you're like, Kathleen, I want to buy this property, and here it is, and I don't communicate what your goals are, what your performance is, what your budgets are to my regionals for them to kind of trickle that information down to the staff, And I learned that if you put the staff on a weekly call with the manager, a lot of companies say, oh, owners can't talk to managers. I highly, highly disagree with that. I think that not only should owners talk to managers, but it should be on a FaceTime of Zoom. So one, you want to be able to see and read a person just as well as I can, You can tell when someone's scared or not telling you the full truth when you're looking at them. When they're just talking, sometimes you can't. And sometimes you can't looking at them, but you have a better idea. You can see that they're in the office working, for your property, and you can talk to them. Now, I tell owners this on the side. Be careful what you say to managers, though, because at the end of the day, they want to make you happy. So sometimes they don't tell the full truth, And my biggest thing to my managers when I talk to them is, you always want to be as open and honest as you can with your owners. Now, if you make a mistake, come to me first and tell me, okay? And we will tell them, hey, we made this mistake, but here's what we're doing to fix it. And everyone has to realize that mistakes will happen, So I think that kind of communication is the biggest thing I've learned with Ghan Cooper.
Yeah, I think that's just such a key thing. I mean, key learning for anything in real estate or business-wise in general is, I mean, the for lack of a better term, the crap always gets sniffed out. And so if you don't have that open line of communication, honesty in real estate especially, I think there can be kind of a domino of issues.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, key in hiring or partnering is not just trying to save every last penny and you get what you pay for sort of deal. So I think that's a key in any whether you're hiring property manager or not. And then I like that Zoom, it's kind of a tip, get them on camera, make sure they're on camera. Like in the virtual world we are in now, just one, are they paying attention, and you're getting those reads on them, if they're squirming or not on a certain question. I think that's super key. And real estate and property management, the transparency is huge. Transparency and speed of communication is super important. Real estate is, known as a slow moving you see the stocks, they're very fast. Real estate is is more like a yacht when it turns on the water, boat. But for me, always in real estate, I don't want anyone waiting on me. And I think issues can get worse especially in property management and asset management, if you don't act fast. Issues actually they don't buff out. Some people have a philosophy of it this will buff out, but if you let that kink or sore become huge, or you let a little cavity become a root canal, sort of I guess analogy there. But I think that's super key, and what I've seen and you at Ghan Cooper too has been key in our building. I like what you said about having the background in ownership too. You look at deals a little bit differently if you have equity in them versus just trying to get that 3 to, single family people are doing 10% or 3%. You look at it a lot differently. And I think owners respect that for sure. So I think that's key, looking at it in an owner's perspective, going back, like, are we just fixing this a quick fix? Is this going to keep happening if we're just doing this?
100%.
Trying to find solutions for it that is going to stop the problem.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think, issues, and especially in property management, can, I feel like, be kind of like a roof leak. It could be small drops, but over a long period of time can cause huge issues, mold and all this kind of stuff. 100%. And so, I love kind of what you're saying about, reducing those compounding.
It can be a lot of bad news too. So I think some of those property managers, they're just afraid to give. It's like, I need to know, like I understand if it's maybe it's a mess up, but it's like, just tell me now. So.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's really not a mess up. Most of the time, especially, and most of what I did was B and C class reposition. And, B and C class repositions walls out, most of your problems happen inside the wall. So A class, you don't have as much as that. So it's always so hard for a manager every time they say, like, hey, there's this plumbing job. We've gotten 13 bids all at $70,000, and I don't know what else to tell you, you know? And I think what makes a difference of, kind of what I used to have to do and what I do now is that you really have to vet your clients, because I can't let you be screaming at us or yelling at my staff because you're mad that the sewer line broke on your property. That's inevitable based on age, or cast iron lines, or things that you just can't help, And so I think that's an important key too, is that property managers have to vet their clients as much as their clients vet them. And every time I talk to a new client, I tell them, like, please, like, interview as many other people. I'll give you people to interview too, because you have to have such a trust and communication that goes into it. And one of the things I love about Brian, he never talks badly about anyone, and I love that. Most people love to play the blame game. Well, it's the property management company did this or they did that, and math doesn't lie. I've looked at a lot of financials. I've run out a lot of properties where I'd say 20% of the time I can clearly tell you, it's probably your property management company. But 80% of the time, it's just a mix of not buying correctly, overpricing your rents and not getting there, and not completing your rehab correctly. And that's been a big one. What you do with your rehab dollars in the beginning is so important. And that's why I tell people too, for me, I love to help you with the property from the get-go, because you may have a budget in mind of what you want to spend on the exterior. And once you give it to me, I love to tell you where I think you should put that money and make some changes right there up front, because I know a lot of people want to put it into, something that's just not. They want to put it into like a dog park or this and only rehab 40% of the interior. So I'm like, okay, well, take some of that out, do a little bit more on your interiors, because you're going to have to do it anyways, I guarantee you, based on age, and we can save some dollars here or there. So it's, communication is just huge.
That's a huge value. I think when you're thinking about good property management and you're an investor listening to this, there should be oftentimes where you're looking at property, or if you're underwriting property, you should be taking that to your property management. And if they're good, in my opinion, and I've seen others around here locally, they will be willing to, especially on, as it gets larger multifamily, obviously maybe that's a little bit out of their scale, but especially when it's kind of, my sweet spot would be kind of 100 and less units. Like, if you have a property manager that's willing to kind of walk through that underwriting with you, help you understand where they think rents truly are and can be, and not, overly overly guessing where they could be at.
Have you ever had an owner not hire you or you not go with an owner because they bought a very dilapidated C-class property and they had $0 for capex, and they said, oh, we're going to rent for $2 square, discrepancy
100%.
on rent. And
100%. I have no problem telling people when I'm not on the same page as them, because if I don't believe in what you're doing, and here's what I tell people too. The property management company is the one that's going to take all the blame no matter what.
For sure.
Nobody has any clue that Brian Wagers owns this property. They think Ghan Cooper owns it. They think Ghan Cooper manages it. They think Ghan Cooper's everything for that property, you know? So I'm not going to take something where I think maybe you're going to fail at this, because then it's just going to make my reputation even worse too. Right. Now sometimes they have a plan like, hey, Kathleen, we know that these numbers don't line out, but here's the end goal and here's what we're going to do. And I'm like, okay, fine. So long as we're all on the same page, but you have to be on that same page. So yeah, there's many times where I've turned down a property, and I'm sure that there's many times where they've decided, hey, let's go with someone else because they're, and I know they have. I mean, some of them have even told me, they tell me that this is going to happen and you've told me it can't. And I'm like, well, math is math.
Right.
Still,
Exactly.
I just, sometimes I just don't understand people's math. But even to take your point a step further, if you don't have someone that will help you even on the 100 and less, and I don't typically manage 100 less than 100.
Yeah.
It usually has to sustain its own staff. But I will still, always run anything out for anyone. It's how I built my whole company, accidentally running out property in Fort Smith because I had nothing else to do.
Right.
When I first started, I had 0 doors. I'm like, he's like, oh, this guy emails me, I have no idea who he is. Like, hey, Kathleen, I heard you used to work for Trinity. I heard you used to manage these properties. We have our own management company that we like to use, but can you just perform it for us? Because he used to be there.
Yeah.
I thought, what the heck? And I'm like, well, Kathleen, you've got nothing better to do tomorrow. Like, why not? So I did. And I ended up getting the properties because I probably communicated faster than whoever they were using at the time. And I do think that was the issue, that company was growing up in the north here and not communicating fast enough. And I think that's how most of what I have, I got even through brokers. I have a lot of referrals to brokers in this area. And I think it's just because when they need reports, I send them. I never understand why you can't get a rent roll same day. Or not in PDF. Like, how hard is it to click that button in Excel and send it? To this day, I still have no clue.
That's a good tip for our investors. Your property manager better be able to send you a rent roll within 24 hours. It's not
No doubt.
like they should be on that. That's fine. I don't think we've ever disagreed on like business plan or numbers. You have turned me down for locations though. You haven't gone to certain locations. I guess, when I started using you on Fort Smith properties, it was some smaller, it was like some 20 units, some 54 units, some 79 units. So has that evolved from Ghan Cooper now that you guys are being more selective on, 100 units and up? Or
no, roll my eyes. No. So sometimes it's not that I feel bad for people. Sometimes I see a bigger picture with a group and I'm like, okay, when that was probably a case with you, Brian. I've known you, and we've done other projects, even with Trinity. I think I was on my way out
we first met.
when you were on your way in. Yes. And other times I get calls from people. And this one, I have a client out of Florida who has 20 duplexes in Fort Smith, and one they're new, brand new, not A-class, but brand new. And no matter how many times I said, no, this isn't for me, give you this person, that company, he was like, nope, you're going to do, and that's going to be what it is. And sometimes that just happens. And other times I can see the goal, and I'm like, fine, I will help you and do it for this. But here's the thing, and this is what people have to realize. Anything from 30 doors to 80 doors is just as much work as 100, and you don't have the staff or the funds to pay for it. So you have to be structured for it. And I'm just honestly not structured for it. Out of Fort Smith, I have created a structure, which I still don't like, and I make $0 off this structure, but I do it for some clients where it's a higher management fee. I pay the payroll, and then I bill back for maintenance. So I have a floating crew of like 5 or 6 maintenance guys, and I can send them, if they're not busy on one of the smaller assets, I can send them to go help on make-readies on my bigger stuff, and we just build them back to that property. And they can do HVAC. So in the summers, they're booked. They're going to do all, a lot of the HVAC work too. But I can't recreate it in every market I've tried. It's just not as easy. And when you hit harder markets, and Northwest Arkansas is not what I would consider at all a hard market. But Little Rock, Oklahoma City are more difficult markets. St. Louis, Atlanta. When you hit those markets, 50 units, you need a full-time person. If you don't, you will fail at it, unless it's a brand new, A-class with not a lot going on and people want to come in. I have a few that are under 100 there, and we tried to, once we stabilized it, reposition it, we tried to split out the staff again, and your occupancy drops just as fast, and we were not losing money, but not making as much as when I just had the staff there.
Right.
So
it's interesting.
Yeah, honest with people that, in some of these more difficult demographic areas, you just have to have someone there.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's almost like babies. I mean, they need the attention,
100%.
every single one of them.
Yeah, and they need routine.
Exactly.
Yep.
And even just kind of going back to property management and kind of the job that y'all do, I think having, like you were saying, having that local knowledge of areas that maybe you don't, you wouldn't recommend to Brian or wouldn't recommend to another investor, or even just understanding when they're doing their pro forma.
Yep.
Maybe a C-class building in a certain neighborhood, or the maintenance costs, upkeep is going to be a lot more than that same building in another location or whatever, because of, certain factors out there. And so I think for you, any property manager out there, for them to know that to have that kind of local knowledge is super important. And so investors that are listening to this, I think that's definitely something to consider, especially if you're in the Fort Smith market, having somebody like Kathleen on your side.
And for that clarification on the location, it was that's not a bad location. It was, I think, logistically at the time, because we've done some C-class. It was in some C-class areas for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you and I tell people this too. And investors, when they're looking, they're buying. If they're buying small, try and find this cold call the smallest, like real estate agents or property management companies in that area, and ask them if they take on property, because you'll fall through the cracks with a big company, because there are big companies that will take you. There are, but you'll fall through the cracks. It's way better if you can find a smaller company that already is set up for it and already does it, even on a small local level.
Yeah,
so that would be my advice to
The
them.
smaller deals are harder to manage for like third party, but they're, as investors, they're easier to put together with the onesie twosies. Like you can have couple investors on one deal.
Yeah, but you hear a lot of what you just said, though, that it takes the same time to manage 50 than it is to manage 150. And so you hear guys like Greg Cardone, big real estate guy out there. I have listened to a lot of his stuff. A lot of others probably have too. You're smiling because of it, but just like he's always said, it's the same thing to buy this, to buy that, and I think for investors out there, outside of looking at the price, when you're looking at a function of how you're operating the business and partnering with property management, it makes no difference, and oftentimes more is better, is what it sounds like.
Cardone says, I agree on his like hustle mentality. Like there's the 10x rule. I mean, if you're in sales, like that is a book you should absolutely read. But his real estate advice doesn't apply to. I mean, he's like, don't buy anything smaller than a 32 unit. Don't buy don't buy a single, like your residence, just rent. Yeah. Like I've had so much equity just in the home and made a lot of money in the smalls. It can be done, but the philosophy is true. Yeah, the 32 unit is just as you got to get a loan, you got to get insurance, you got to get property management. Same on the 100 unit. You just might have to bring more money to. You got to have a couple more partners sometimes.
Yeah,
it's all with a grain of salt with all those kind of guys and stuff. So I think it's interesting. I'd love to start rolling in more about kind of property and asset management best practices, kind of what y'all see out there. What do you think is one big thing that separates good from great property management companies out there, especially for our listeners that may be thinking about, passing off their portfolio to somebody and what that looks like?
Yep. Middle level management, your regional directors, always ask where they're located, how many units do they have, how spread out is that portfolio. Middle level management touches everything. Your regionalists talk to they talk to residents, they talk to staff, they talk to maintenance guys, they talk to the owners, they talk to bankers, they talk to absolutely every person out there, inspectors that come to the property. If you don't, and they talk to me, if you don't have a really, really good, strong middle-level management team in your company,
shout out Amy.
Shout out Amy. Shout out. I have a bunch right now. So shout out Amy. Shout out Alex. I've got Caitlin. I've got a bunch of really, really great middle level managers. I've got a couple of new ones that are showing a ton of potential too. So
you said earlier in the episode, bigger is not always better. What do you mean? Can you elaborate there?
So one of my biggest things with leaving Trinity was that the goals of Trinity at that time were to become one of the top 10 biggest property management companies in the country, and that I learned was just not my goal. My goal more was to stay small, be able to communicate, and have a little idea of who my staff was. Which I didn't. Even if I can't shop a property in Little Rock anymore because I'll walk in and they know who I am, and I have not a clue who they are. But we were just so big at the time for me.
Did they have a wanted sign out there? Kathleen?
You know, it's funny. I think,
Press this button.
yeah,
She's here.
yeah, most of them liked me. Now, not saying that they love seeing me. If I'm showing up somewhere, it's probably like, okay, something went wrong, but I think we had good relationships.
Yeah,
But Miss Kathleen, is that you? I'm like, yes, it is. Hello, but I don't know.
That's awesome.
I wonder if that's because it's a woman too. Like if they know, like, it's usually a guy coming, like probably on these,
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, no, you know what? I think if you're going to shop a property, send a woman in there. Men, oh my God, you guys say the stupidest things. You
so
stand
true.
out like we know who you are, the second that you walk through the door. So, if I'm shopping a property, I'm trying to dress down and, cover up what I'm doing because no one talks to you if they know what's happening.
True.
So dive in on that. Some of our listeners that might not know what you mean, like secret shopping,
Yep.
shopping. What do you describe that? What is
So
it?
I do it for a few different reasons. One, if we're just trying to get market surveys and we're trying to say, hey, what's this staff doing? What could we be doing better? We do that a ton in Northwest Arkansas. It's so competitive, and the staffing and the employees up here are fantastic. And you should go and listen and learn is what I tell my staff, and they go out there. What can we do better in our office? But for most of the time, if I'm shopping a property, it's because I've had a client that called me up saying, hey, we're looking at this. Do you like it? And I just want to get my eyes on it. I want to see what the staff is doing. Again, most brokers are going to tell you that it's being mismanaged. And that's why you're going to be able to get $200 more a door, and you're going to do this. And that's always like to see it for myself. So we shop it first, and we give them a small report, hey, here's what we found. Here's what we think exterior-wise it's going to need. Most of I don't take just a straight C class if you're not going to put any money into it, because unless it's already, stabilized. But, if you want to reposition something, that takes dollars. So I want to see, and I'll tell you what I think. Roofs look good, parking lot this. High level. This is not to build your complete budget off of, but very high level what we saw, staircases, how they looked, and what we think the apartment needs organically, what we think the apartment needs to reposition, what rent rates we think we could get afterwards. Just a very high level shop that we do.
And what's the difference between shopping and secret? I feel like secret shopping, acting as a prospective resident to see how their leasing functions, what their actual rents are versus advertised.
Both shopping.
That's probably all of it, yeah.
And then shopping, you kind of described there too as also like, checking the exteriors, walking the site, like.
Yeah. Now, I'm not walking to see it. When you send a man to shop for that purpose, they will be asking about the exteriors and trying to take pictures. Mm-hmm. I wait for later to do that. So I always pose as someone that's just looking to rent, if they're for my daughter, for myself, something, And then I just notice things when you're walking, as they walk the path, I'm going to be able to see what generally the staircase are going to look like. Or once I leave them, I'll drive the property myself and just kind of take a quick high level look at what I think it needs. Other than that, I'm always just a renter. You'll get the most information from someone if you just pose as the renter. Once you tell them you're shopping or looking, half the time they don't know what to say, or they're going to tell you no. So I always pose as that.
No, it's great work. I think understanding, that's probably the best way you can get the understanding, like you're saying, and how energetic someone is to help get you information. And what you mentioned, the mismanagement piece. I mean, you really kind of get a lens on that. Are they going to answer your phone call?
Correct.
Are they going to follow up with you? Are they blah blah blah?
Yep.
If they're doing all those things, maybe it's not mismanaged. And
100%. You can ask my sisters in New York. They get a ton of phone calls following up on if they're going to come rent an apartment at any given state. So
that's all.
Say that too. I'm giving their number.
I have to. Mine says Kathleen with Ghan Cooper. So I give them my sister's number, and they get a lot of phone calls. So
that's awesome.
You guys ever? I think you brought this up, but I don't know if I found this out from you, but like secret shopping your own company too.
100%.
Like to.
Yes, I do it.
Make sure.
I pay for it. I do it. It is so cheap. I tell them that I'm going to do it so that they answer the phone great. Every time I don't lie to them about it, I tell them, hey, we secret shop ourselves. You'll get the report. Not only do you get the report, you get it from me with notes. I don't always agree with the grades, but I get to listen to the whole thing. And I honestly do listen to it, especially if the grade is like lower. And I can tell in the first 5 seconds of someone answering a call, let me give them 10 seconds, if it's going to be a call that I think is good,
right?
And not, hey, is it just them asking questions, or is it the person shopping them or calling, asking all the questions? Is there any kind of a conversational flow? You can find that out really quickly. So yes, we do it. If you work for me at Ghan Cooper, you get secret shopped.
That's awesome.
Yes, and I reward you if you do well. So
that's awesome.
And if you don't, I mean, it's good. Where can you improve? Hey, you didn't call me right back. You didn't call me back and send me a follow-up email with all the different available unit types. Like, I feel like there's a lot of What's the most common reason you have to let go of someone, in property management? How long is that? They're not good at leasing. They fraud. I mean, you saw it in the beginning, like people trying to skim, like see an easy way to skim up. I think it's become harder to do that when you're not dealing with cash, but
I wouldn't say that there's one thing that I ever have to get rid of somebody for. Honestly, if you're not a good fit, I can see it overall. It's usually going to be in your income numbers. It's going to be in your occupancy. It's going to be there in everything. And my regionals are so in contact with their staff. I mean, they're on a weekly call with them, and they're all in their offices. I mean, they're on site, they're boots on the ground, they're there trying to help them. So you could tell, and we have so many calls with our owners, and emails. You can tell, you can watch my managers evolve to taking 24 hours to respond to an email to taking 24 minutes to respond to an email. And it makes my life so happy, and they all know that I love it, Yeah. So if they're just not a good fit, and there just are some people that just are not a good fit for property management. Now, I have some people who are phenomenal managers. I mean, collect rent, lease units, but they can't do reporting. That I can work with. My regionals can help you with reporting. I understand that part is hard and difficult. Not everyone can do it. And just because you can't report, but you are killing it on occupancy and your income, I can work with that 100%. But if you can't kind of do those things, that's when I'm like, okay, let me refresh what we're doing here. So I'm pretty quick to hire and fire. I'm not one of those people that thinks that you have to really take your time, and that's not my philosophy at all.
I think that's important, and those are all really good business practices. I personally don't think there's anything more important in business than promptness, especially when it comes to our businesses and real estate. Like being prompt, like I would love. I think about that every now and then. I'm like, I would love for, I'm selling a big deal in Bentonville right now, a bunch of duplexes, and then I've just thought through, like, I would love for one of the owners to have someone secretly call me and just see how fast I get back to them, because that's something that I pride myself in.
Me too.
And I know the owners value that. And so I think for any listener, whether it's in your business or kind of trying to figure out what property management you want to go to, even just kind of going through the interview process, how quickly are folks getting back to you, and or if they miss you, then how quick are they following back up with you and getting back with you? So I think it's super important. So one more thing before I'd love to get a little bit more into kind of your opinions on Northwest Arkansas and Fort Smith, and I think our listeners love to kind of hear different things about different markets. But when this is also for our listeners, if someone is looking for property management, what would you say, and they feel like, a bigger regional property management company may not be a good fit for them because they've got too much going on and this and that. Do you think there's advantages for someone choosing a bigger company like Ghan Cooper, or do you think there's advantages for a smaller local company? What's your opinion and experience on that?
Well, one, thank you, but I would never consider Ghan Cooper a big company at all. I think we're probably the smallest
big company
out there, only because to manage a lot of these Fannie Freddie loans, you have to be qualified. HUD loans, you have to already be on their list. So not every company can do it. So first you have to figure out where your lending is coming from. Local lenders won't care, but once you get into the bigger lending, you have to have a qualified manager, and that's who they deem qualified. I am not saying that means that they're qualified, okay? So it's kind of a twofold question, just depends on what you're looking for. So for the smaller people buying under, 100 or under, and, going with local, I think that I would still really talk to the property management company. If they can't help you perform the property, and I mean truly like give you a performa, I probably wouldn't say that that's your best bet, because industry has evolved too much to not be able to do that, you know? And I do think that there are some smaller companies that are still good, but they just manage a little bit more old school. And I think that you will not feel the full benefits. I mean, these companies also don't do renewals anymore,
Right.
you know? So if they can't give you a performa, I would be a little concerned, you know? Now, again, if you're buying 10, even for 10 houses, I'm going to perform it for you, you know, because I want to see if it's going to cash flow before I take it. Because if not, what would be the point of me taking it if you can't pay? So
Right.
to me, I personally, once you've hit like 20,000 doors in a property management company is what says to me that you're big, you know, 15 to 20,000. I don't even ever want to be that big. I think it's honestly personal preference.
What's Ghan Cooper at now?
About anywhere from 7,000 to 7,500
Okay.
at any time. You know, I think we're onboarding couple hundred right now, a couple hundred just sold. So
And you mentioned you started where they were at, what, 300, 350?
up
Is
to zero.
0, yeah.
307 units.
That was my first one that I took.
Okay.
Yes. So, and that was, we started in April 15th and I got that one in September. So I went
Amazing.
those months with, I did sell a property. I thought I was going to be a broker, PS, when I realized, okay, we're not buying our own properties here, that I would be able to manage it. And I sold the Jeannie Hendricks was the first thing I ever did at Ghan Cooper.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I sold it for, I don't even remember. I couldn't even tell you right now but to one of my investors. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Brian, I'd love to ask you that too, as far as you have experience with both larger asset managers and smaller. What do you see as like differences on those two?
I would definitely start getting opinions early on, like when you're close on, like, you're not gonna do your back of the table napkin, make sure the deal works for you. Like theoretically, you're not just sending them everything, but like if someone can't pro forma, you pro forma also holds someone accountable. Like in 12 months, we can look back and say, hey, this is what we were expect. Like we're nowhere near this, or we're well above it. So
that's why you put the disclaimer at the bottom.
Yeah.
Like, to PS.
Exactly.
This is what we think. But I think you should get a good feel. Like that rapport should be good. We've talked a lot about speed on this podcast, but you should feel good about the back and forth that you're having. Hey, I'm buying this 8 unit from myself and Rogers, and here's where the current rents are. My brother-in-law manages it. You know, I would like to put professional property management on it. What do you think the rents are? What is your guys' structure? Ask them what their structure is. Mm-hmm. A lot of the sub 100 are doing, higher percentage, but they might not have payroll. They might be like 8% and more traditional like residential. They structure it more like the 8 to 10%.
Right.
And then you won't pay payroll, but they also might get half months rent free. And
Right.
I think you can negotiate with them a little bit too, see how they accept negotiation. If they don't negotiate with you, what's their reasoning for why they can, if it's fine, if they can't budge on certain items, but call around. She had a good tip, for the smaller properties, call some realtors. If it's maybe like a Poto, Oklahoma, you might call around, you might have to cold call around there. I would always try to get 3 opinions unless you're running with someone and they've killed it on my last property manager. It makes sense just to repeat that process, because then you can build some scalability with that company too.
Right.
So I'm asking them how many units they manage, what kind of assets do they manage. Trinity and Ghan Cooper were first in C-class in Fort Smith. That was super important to me for C-class in Fort Smith. I'm not using Lund is a big one here in Northwest Arkansas that's growing. They're doing a lot of development A-class, but I don't know what kind of C-class experience they have. So that's great. We manage 2,000 multifamily units, and here's a performance. What does that portfolio look like? Is that a lot of smalls, a lot of bigs, a lot of A-class, a lot of C-class? So that'll help you,
And accounting.
Before you get to accounting.
It's huge. It's one of the biggest things that everyone, anytime they're trying to do a management change, and I sit down and I ask them, what don't you like about your company now? everyone's biggest thing is always accounting, how they pay the bill. So it must be a huge problem.
Yeah, county, and I think that also goes back to the bigger, not better. So I've seen firsthand some of the property management companies grow too big too quickly, and their back end falls apart. They can't keep up with the accounting on all these projects where the middle management might not be that strong because they've grown so fast. They're not hiring the middle management, and that reporting is not good. And then you've got this accountant. They're trying to get scale that they may not be paying, and you see that fall apart. So I think
it's corporate and mom and pop too. You hit a line where all of a sudden you can't do anything on your own, So my company, if you send a bill, I can pay it same day and same hour,
Ask for a report on an example. I mean, if you really want to get into it, you could ask for, hey, could I see an example monthly report that you send on one of your properties and see if that aligns. I mean, one of the first ones I was using in Springdale, they were using Microsoft Excel.
Yeah.
It was all just on Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bank accounts. A lot of my smaller clients who have come to me afterwards have said, like, hey, is this normal? Like, they have one bank account and they feed all the money from everyone's property into this one account. Yeah, back in the day, that was normal. Now, do you want to do that? Or for an asset that's over $50? No. How do you set up bank accounts? It's little things that you don't even think of when you're first buying property, and investing and getting a property management company. I would have never thought about bank accounts. Like, I just assumed you're going to open my own account for me, right?
Right. Yeah. I love it. So I think just kind of as we wind down, I'd love to hit a couple more things, just kind of more market centric here. As far as Northwest Arkansas and Fort Smith, obviously we're in Northwest Arkansas. We've got a lot of folks that listen to this because they're interested in Northwest Arkansas, but would love to just get your kind of thoughts on how those markets differ from Fort Smith to Northwest Arkansas and kind of what you see as exciting things coming to Fort Smith. Obviously, you've got a great pulse on that. So.
Yeah. So they're, as much as I say that they're the same because we're in stable areas and it's amazing, both areas, and I love them both. Clearly, Northwest Arkansas is growth, rent growth, population growth. We had a ton of rent growth here since COVID in Fort Smith for the first time, but before that was the most stable rent you've ever seen in your entire life. Northwest Arkansas is not like that. You guys had great rent growth, and you still do, and you have great population growth. And although it's slowed down a little bit, the population growth here is still growing. Fort Smith is unfortunately not a growing population area, not quite yet.
Do you see some of that spillover though, even?
So I think with the new F-35 project coming in, I think that will certainly help and maybe put us on the map a little bit more. But I think people shouldn't just tune out Fort Smith, and I think they did for a long, long time. And that was probably a mix of, the older owners not putting anything on the market and just trade in between people, and no one ever came in. And, we couldn't even get, Fannie Freddie loans in secondary market. I mean, I remember walking Berkadia around Fort Smith trying to prove to them why they should lend money in the area. So, and I think now, that's there, and we've had investors come in. We've shown that there is room for growth there, but nothing like Northwest Arkansas. You guys just have such an influx of people and cultures, and it's much more aggressive, and your A class is so much better. And I think that's because in Fort Smith, you can be lower to middle A class, and especially dual income household, and still go out and buy a house pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Northwest Arkansas, you're right on that cusp. Like, hey, can I buy a house? Do I want to buy this house? I'd rather go travel. And so your rent market for your higher B's and A's up is just so much better. C class, I think it's barely the same. Mm-hmm. I think the income levels are almost the same from Northwest Arkansas down to Fort Smith. It's really where your A class comes in that just separates the whole market, Yeah. So, and we're starting to get a little of that with the new college that came into Fort Smith, and again, this F-35 project. I've seen some rents that are matching what you guys get up here, but that's in small scales, and it takes a lot longer to lease them up.
Sure.
A lot longer.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think that's a big difference, though, thinking about here. I mean, I guess anywhere where the median home price is trending, and can someone buy something for a similar monthly payment that they can buy or that they can rent? Yep. And in Fort Smith, I think there's a lot more opportunity there to do so than here, unless you're willing to drive. But I think Northwest Arkansas will continue to turn into a renter community. because people want to be near things.
Yep.
People
Walkability.
right, walkability. The median price is continuing to go up. We probably will crack over the national median home price probably over the next 10 years, if I had to guess, if we do continue to track towards what they think we're going to be at 1 million population in 15 or 20 years. It only makes sense that we do. But we do have a lot of developable land.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of only a matter of time, I think.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, but good for investors, obviously.
It is, yeah. And if you're building, I mean, because in Fort Smith, I think it's harder to build and hit the rents you need to for what the cost of building is now. But in Northwest Arkansas, it's not, and you can make that work. So if you're a smaller, kind of newer investor, like come look in Fort Smith because there's still some great deals. And there's no bad areas, which even Northwest Arkansas, I can almost argue any place to you, but
right.
It's a good area and it's going to be a good area. And I'll make the argument and I believe in it, whether it happens tomorrow or in 4 more years. But I really can do that for the same in Fort Smith minus a couple of locations where I'm like, hey, it's still going to be stable. You're not going to, but just be a little bit more careful. So
yeah,
you have to look at the driving factors behind all of that is very true. And then what causes it to be more of a renters and these increase in populations, there's more corporations and we have 3 Fortune 500 companies in Northwest Arkansas. But what's interesting about Fort Smith, there's a huge manufacturing, a lot of manufacturing businesses. So, with the tariff situation, if U.S. Manufacturing, gets more prominent, that's only going to help Fort Smith. You have the F-35,
Sure.
You have the F-35 program. I didn't know about a new school. I know the University of Arkansas Fort Smith has been kind of steady.
Yeah, the osteopathic college medical school that's out there in Chaffee. It's like driving, and if you haven't driven through Chaffee recently in Fort Smith, I mean, it looks like Northwest Arkansas.
That's where you want to live if you're
and I'll say this to anyone, it's like, do I want to live in Bentonville or do I want to live in Fayetteville?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Do I want to live downtown or do I want to live in Chaffee? That's where
Chaffee
all the
kind of
new-
uptown.
Yeah. It's all the new, all the 3-4 story apartment complexes that we've never seen in Fort Smith. That's where all that's going to be. I mean, at some point, I think it'll be its own community. I remember sitting in, I think his name's Kyle Parker, who runs the university there. He was giving a tour before anything was there, and he's looking out, and he's like, yeah, all this is going to be banks and homes and apartments and restaurants. I'm looking out there like, what are you talking about? Where? And, good for him. I mean, he did it, and I think Bob Cooper was huge in Chaffee development too, and it's been quite the place. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Kathleen, we've loved having you on the podcast and kind of getting to know a little bit more about what you do and kind of your story a little bit. Where can people find you and contact you if they would love to do so on Fort Smith?
My easiest way is email, which is Kathleen@GhanCooper.com. Do I have to spell that too?
No.
Probably. It's hard,
Yep.
Or just text me, 845-401-8939, and that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Yeah, you've had such good nuggets about kind of property management, asset management, what that's looked like for you over the years. And I think there's a lot of great knowledge for investors to kind of be able to take and figure out kind of what that looks like for them and their investing journey, and also the first woman on our podcast.
Let's go.
So we're super stoked to have you. It was awesome, and so just thanks again for your time. We really value that. So
I appreciate it. It was fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it, Kathleen.
Yeah.
appreciate you.
All right, see you guys.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an update.
Don't forget to connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn for more real estate insights and behind-the-scenes content.
Have a question you want us to cover? Send it our way. And if you're interested in sponsoring the show, visit nwainvesting.com to get in touch. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.